Hi, I'm Taylor Morden, director of The Last Blockbuster, and you're watching CF3 on Project Nerd.
Hello and welcome to another episode of CF3 Cult Fans, Films, and Finds. I'm Dane Michael.
And I am Jeff Johnson.
And our blood-sucking freak of a co-host, Dames Marvs, is joining us again. Dames, are you drinking anything for tonight's broadcast?
In honor of the true Blockbuster home video rental experience, I am drinking something, but I got my bag of gumballs, because I frequently would hit up the gumball machine on the way out the door. Got my mini Starbursts and my novelty soda, which was always an indicator that I was at the video store. So
cherry soda.
I got my movie theater Raisinets.
Nice.
And a Johnny Lawrence original Coors Banquet. And Jeff, anything from you?
Just my tried and true pull for Mountain Dew, zero sugar. Hey, it's movie themed. We got to have some Mountain Dew around here somewhere.
All right, do the do. They're going to sponsor us for this episode I've just heard. Guys, we've got an exciting show because our guest for this episode is a director and producer whose pop motion pictures have brought you Here's to Life, the story of these guys, the Refreshments, a doc about third wave ska called Pick It Up, Ska in the 90s, featuring interviews with people like the Mighty Mighty Boss Tones, people from No Doubt, and Less Than Jake, all those bands. But more recently, he's brought us a film that has been a big hit on Netflix, to my understanding, and that is The Last Blockbuster, which is about the rise and fall of Blockbuster Video and the very last remaining store. And before we bring him on, it would be remiss not to mention his very strong cosplay game, you guys. Which one is the real Louis Tully? I have no idea.
Ooh.
Holy shit.
But perhaps he can sort it all out for us. Please welcome to the show, Mr. Taylor Morden. Yeah.
Hey.
Yeah, buddy.
Hello.
Welcome. We always like to start the show with the same question for every guest, and that is one that Jeff asks. So, Jeff, I'm going to throw it off to you.
Oh, the infamous question of what kind of cult classics did you like growing up?
What kind of cult classics? I mean, what is that?
So, motorcycle movies.
Sweet motorcycle, yeah.
Hey, free sound effects on this show.
Just rad. Only the movie Rad. When I was a kid, they weren't cult classics. They were just movies. I mean, I was just into whatever I could get my hands on. So the ones that later became cult classics, I feel like I'm mostly a comedy guy. So like Adventures in Babysitting, Howard the Duck, Revenge of the Nerds. Those are my kind of
That's your
culty favorites.
So Adventures in Babysitting, I noticed pops up in a scene in The Last Blockbuster. So that was planted there by you.
Sure. Everything was intentional. Yeah.
Let's see here. So first of all, I want to point out, and I had it pulled up on the screen here, but the sheer genius of Netflix, the reason I know about this film is because they chose to put Kevin Smith right on the screen there. And I will instantly watch anything that I know has Kevin Smith in it because I want to hear his thoughts on everything. He defines fandom. to me. And was that, I mean, as far as the number of people that you got to appear in this documentary, was he like one of the first, or was he always on your list of people to get?
Yeah, he was on our list from the very beginning. What we did is we just wrote down people we knew had worked at video stores. So the list was Kevin Smith, Quentin Tarantino, Paul Scheer, Adam Brody, and so on and so forth. We Googled, there were a few others, but for the most part, it was Kevin Smith and Tarantino were the, like, if we don't get one of these guys, what are we doing? Talking about video stores in the 90s, and it took a long time to get Kevin in the movie. He said yes pretty early on, but he's so busy and kind of hard to get a hold of that it took about a full year from when he said, sure, I'll be in your movie, to when we actually met up with him and had cameras rolling.
Did you have like deadlines at that point coming up where you were starting to get worried that it wouldn't happen?
No, the beauty of a documentary like this is there is no deadline. We were waiting to see if the store was going to stay open or not. And either way, we had to wait for that to happen, for either a happy ending or a huge bummer of an ending. But that was, still probably 6 months out. And even if that had come and gone, we were making the movie independently. There was no studio. There was no, corporate overlords telling us when we had to have it done by. So we just sort of finished it. It was done when it was done,
So how did the streaming distribution through Netflix get done? So they had to see the finished product before they'd say yes or no?
Yeah. We tried to get people interested early on, but when we started making this thing, there were still a dozen blockbusters left, and people just didn't care. We'd say, hey, we want to make a movie about Blockbuster. Who wants in? And nobody wanted in. Everybody was like, that's okay, sure, I guess, whatever. And then a couple of years pass, and the Captain Marvel trailer came out, and then people were like, oh yeah, Blockbuster, that was fun. And then the John Oliver thing happened, and people were like, huh. And then it became the last one, and then all the news stations and everybody was like, oh my God, everybody cares all of a sudden. And we were 3 years into making the movie by that point. So, by that point, we didn't need anybody's help, really. We were just, let's finish it and pitch it. And then we were very lucky that Netflix has a pretty good sense of humor, because they're a character in the movie. We talk about Netflix. We talk about what happened between Blockbuster and Netflix and all that. And the fact that they, were okay with kind of poking fun at themselves on their own platform, it was great. I mean, somebody at Netflix has a good sense of humor.
So were you clairvoyant in this, in knowing that? Sorry.
No.
Go ahead, Dave.
Good question.
I am clairvoyant. I just don't know what your question is.
Well, I was wondering, since there was 12 blockbusters left when you started making this, was that always the title that you had envisioned?
No. When it became the last one in the continental United States is kind of when we landed on that title. But for the first 2.5 years, I was just walking around saying, I'm making a documentary about Blockbuster Video. It didn't really have a name. And I was making the ska documentary at the same time. I started them both the same early 2017. And the ska one, because it was about historical stuff, I didn't have to wait for anything. So it was done first. And that came out, and I was kind of pushing that during the making of the Last Blockbuster. So,
but you legitimately live in Bend, Oregon, at least for now.
Yeah, I'm moving right now. There's like boxes just off.
But has that been the case? Like, did you grow up in Bend?
I grew up splitting my time. My parents were divorced, as many 80s kids' parents were divorced. And my mom lived in San Francisco, and my dad lived up here in Oregon, not far from here.
Okay.
But an even smaller town, about an hour outside of Bend. And it was a trip. So I did grow up going to Bend, but not quite Portland. Although I've lived in Portland for a little while, I couldn't quite hang with all the coffee shops and all the
Not
craft
wired enough.
breweries.
Well,
Right.
strip clubs, to be honest with you. But
yeah, more strip clubs per capita in Portland, Oregon than any place else.
But it seems like you are clairvoyant, though, because somehow your documentary, and you live in Bend, and that winds up being the Last Blockbuster, which is crazy, because I'm assuming when you were filming, you were spending most of your time filming in that store and not necessarily going to any of the other ones. Did you visit any of the other ones in the making of this?
Yeah, so when we started in 2017, there were actually 2 here in Central Oregon. There was one about a half an hour away in Redmond, and I had gone to that one. They were owned by the same people and managed by Sandi, so it was connected. And I had reached out. The guy who's in our movie, Alan, who owned the Alaska stores, also owned the stores in Texas. So of the 12 that were left, there were only 3 or 4 people who owned those franchises. Alan was one of them, and then Ken, who owns the stores here. And I had reached out, and there was one other, the one up in Portland, actually, who didn't want anything to do with a documentary. They were like, don't come here, don't bring cameras, you're not allowed. And that was discouraging. I was like, okay, well, that was the only other one I can drive to. Wow. So I didn't have money to fly to Alaska or Texas even, really. But we did do a Kickstarter. We did raise some money. And then at that point, we were like, all right, we're going to go up to Alaska and we're going to go to Texas and we're going to get footage at all these stores that are left. And maybe it'll be a documentary about the last 10 or the last 8 Blockbusters and the towns that they're in and all that. But as we were doing it, we were getting ready to go up to Alaska to film at that store. And we did that interview with Alan because he was here visiting. He was visiting the stores here. And he just told us during the interview, oh, you're too late. We're closing next weekend. You won't make it in time. So, and that kind of happened as we would call around. Like, okay, the footage of the abandoned store, that's the store here in Redmond, that closed like a month after we started filming. So they were really dropping like flies. As fast as we could reach out and say, hey, can we come film that? And they'd be like, well, you can, but we're closing on Wednesday or something. So we never got around to visiting any of the stores outside of Bend.
Jeez.
Now, I don't know if you read reviews, but the very first one that I read was actually before I watched the documentary, because I was like, what is this about, once I saw Kevin Smith's picture. Mm-hmm. And I tried to look for it again so I could quote to you who wrote it and where you can find it. But they essentially indicated that the filmmakers were likely upset that they didn't get the ending they wanted, because it seemed like they would have wanted to just close the book and have the store actually close in Bend at the end of the movie, permanently close. How would you respond to that review?
I have not seen that review. I can't read all that. People write like 4-page things. I'm reading the headline and then I'm on to the next thing.
The stars.
Yeah.
How many stars did they give me?
3 stars, fine. 2 stars, great. I'm not reading your thing, But no, that couldn't be further from the truth, because when we started, all of us here fell in love with Sandi, and we want the store. We're rooting for the store. Once you meet the people, yeah. And also, I am a film fan. I go to Blockbuster. I don't want it to close. Then where am I going to go? Right. Redbox and Safeway? That's not anything. So we never wanted the store to close. I mean, from a like narrative film standpoint, I want the happy ending. I want everybody to live happily ever after. I don't want the mega sad ending where the store closes and then, Sandi gets a job at the coffee shop and that's the end of the movie. What is that? That's terrible. So we were really lucky because it is a documentary and everything that happens in it really happened. So we couldn't have predicted. When we started, we didn't know this would be the last one, and we didn't know they would be fighting to stay open, and we didn't know they would get to stay open. that all just happened. But it happened exactly the way I would have written it if it was a script. If it was a story about this mom and pop store getting taken over by this big corporation and then outlasting them, and then they managed to hang on, and due to the popularity now, after the movie's come out and been on Netflix and millions of people saw it, the store is more popular than ever, and they're like having their best year, even though there's a pandemic. So no, I didn't want them to close. I still don't want them to close.
I got a follow-up question on that. It sounds like they might be doing like an Airbnb with the store. Do you know anything more about that? Something my wife actually mentioned today before the interview. She's like, I heard this on one of my podcasts, and Airbnb at the last one, and we just watched the documentary over the weekend. She just was like, is that something you might want to do? So,
yeah, that was a one-time publicity stunt thing that Airbnb did, and it was supposed to be this really cool thing where, they were going to promote the store and people could come in from all over the world and spend the night in a Blockbuster Video. But when COVID hit, they had to change it. So it was actually only open to Bend residents. You had to already live here because they didn't want people traveling.
right.
And so they did it for 3 nights. Everybody I know tried to book it. It went live and they were all sold out within a minute. So I don't know who got it, but I did hear a story from Sandi that one of the families that got to stay there, because they had it all decked out 90s style, like the big old TV, the VCR, a Nintendo, whatever you want from the 80s and 90s was in there. And this family brought in their old home movies that they didn't have a way to watch, all their old VHS tapes. And they just spent the night in Blockbuster, like watching their wedding tape and watching their kids on home video. And I was just like, aw, that's heartwarming that's what happened with that. But I don't think there's plans to do it again. If there are, get on it because it'll sell out in a minute.
What's the last movie you rented from Blockbuster?
Oh, man. Rented is tough. I've been buying a lot of VHS there because they started carrying, people donate VHS and then they just sell them for a couple bucks. So I've been picking those up pretty frequently. I rented something, it was probably towards the end of 2019 because with COVID, we couldn't really go hang out there. I have to go there to bring them DVDs and movie posters and things to sell. And so when I'm in there, I'll buy something, but I don't want to rent because then I have to go back and it's not COVID safe. God, what did I rent?
What VHS tapes have you scored recently from there?
The last batch I got, they had a whole bunch of old TV shows, and I got episodes of Pee-wee's Playhouse and the show Dinosaurs.
There you go.
And that was a sweet haul. The sweet haul. Yeah, Not the Mama and Pee-wee's Playhouse were the last ones I got. But I was renting, the whole time we were making the movie, I would rent movies all the time because I knew I'd be back in a couple days no matter what because we're filming there. And I'm a big physical media person, even though I'll watch Netflix and everything. But what I love renting from Blockbuster especially is because I used to, before going to Blockbuster, when there were no video stores, I would buy movies for the special features, for the director's commentary, for the outtakes, all that stuff. Even if I didn't love the movie, I have this whole collection of movies that I just wanted to see the special features of. And then once I started going to Blockbuster a lot, I was like, I can just rent these, watch all the special features, and take them back, and it's $4 instead of $20. So I rented a lot of movies over the past 5 years that I didn't watch when I rented the DVD. I just watched all the special features, or I'd watch it with the director's commentary and then bring it back, especially stuff that I had just seen in the theater, 6 months prior.
Jeff, to
any
answer
favorite special features discs?
Oh man, I mean, the ones that stick with me were like the 90s ones when DVD was brand new and they would cram everything in there. I mean, all the Kevin Smith movies have like documentaries on them. Mallrats, Clerks, Dogma, Chasing Amy, those were all great. The Matrix, when that first came out on DVD, it was what everybody used to set up their 5.1 surround sound system. Like their new they weren't even flat screen TVs back then, but like the 32-inch Sony bubble TV. And that had a lot of great special features on it.
Sony Vega.
Trimtron.
I really liked that brief period of time when they were doing the picture-in-picture video commentaries. So like the Goonies had it, and Stand By Me had it for sure.
Yeah, those are great.
So I noticed that you have, and this is funny because I had a question about Hollywood Video. And if there was a concerted effort not to mention it in the documentary as being like the Blockbuster ripoff, but you've got half of a Hollywood Video sign behind you.
I was going to say that looks very familiar.
Yeah. I picked this up on Craigslist. It's not half, it's like 10%. The Hollywood letters are like 12 feet tall and 50 feet wide, so I couldn't get them in my house. Because it's like Hollywood Video, you know. But this was an old neon sign from the Hollywood Video here in Bend that I converted to LED, and I would light it up, but I'm moving and I've already packed the power cable for it. But no, there was no effort to leave Hollywood Video out. I think we asked some people about it, and it just wasn't interesting. You know, Hollywood Video probably deserves its own documentary at some point, and I think there's even still some open, but it's not. You know, it's like the history of Coca-Cola featuring Pepsi. You know, it's not.
Right.
Or featuring like RC Cola.
RC.
Right? Yeah.
If RC Cola had come later, which I'm not sure that it did.
It's like remember the iPod and also the Zune. What?
I still have my Zune somewhere around here.
Me too.
Let's see. We got more questions. Jeff, did you have a question specifically about Lloyd Kaufman, or do you want me to ask?
Well, I was mostly just going to ask, like, he seemed to be the most interesting person who was just basically like, screw Blockbuster straight up. And I was just curious, like, was it like that the whole interview? How much fun did you have interviewing him?
Oh, so much fun. That was, you know, he's somebody I looked up to since I was a kid, since I was way too young to see The Toxic Avenger. And he was really cool. He welcomed us into his home. We're setting up cameras. He's super nice. You know, can I get you coffee? Let's hang out. We're chatting about filmmaking, and you know, he was fascinated with our, like, we have no money, we're trying to make a movie. That's his whole shtick, right? He's got great special features on all of their trauma movies where he'll explain to you how to make a movie with no money. He can't explain how to make a good movie with no money, but he can explain, you know, how to make a movie with no money. And so we were connecting on that, and he's this great guy, and we're big fans. And then the second the cameras go on, he snaps into cranky old man character. It's exactly what you see in the movie, where he's like, "Well, you don't fucking know me. You get the hell out of my, you know, and Blockbuster, and fuck this and fuck that." We used almost all that we could use, and we even had to bleep out some of that. But it's like a 90-minute interview that is all just spewing hatred for the corporate machine that was Blockbuster Video. And I don't disagree with anything he said. It's just, how much of that can we put in a happy, uplifting movie about a small town story, you know?
Right.
We couldn't, he was really dragging it down. Originally, we had him spaced out throughout the movie as like a counterpoint all the time of like, oh, but really it was terrible, and they were the worst, and they were evil. And it's just such a bummer. And then our editor, Tim, put together that 112 seconds thing and kind of got it all out of the way towards the beginning of the movie, and we just loved it. We were just like, that's how you use Lloyd Kaufman in this movie about the thing he hates the most in the world.
And then you're like, one callback is what you get later on.
Oh, you gotta have a
One
callback,
Lloyd.
Oh, yeah.
Have a callback.
Who are some of your favorite interviews besides Lloyd and Kevin that you got on the film?
And this one, well, I'm a big Doug Benson fan. I listen to his podcast, Doug Loves Movies, which is also how we knew Sam Levine would be good speaking about movies, because he's a frequent guest on Doug Loves Movies and wins all the games. And so those two, yeah, the Sam Levine one, The interview is great. He said some really cool things, but what I loved about it is that we shot it in a place called Eddie Brandt's Saturday Matinee, which was unfortunately they closed during COVID, but it was the longest running VHS rental store in LA. And we got to film there, and there's a special feature on the DVD about that store. We interviewed the guy who ran it, and it was just a cool place to be in. You know, we talk about the Blockbuster smell, and it smells like a Blockbuster, but those old mom and pop video stores that are just VHS and thousands of them, they have an even cooler smell of just like piles of plastic.
And how psyched were you to get Doug Benson in store?
So psyched.
Yeah, that was great.
I mean, and that was his idea. I mean, we asked everybody if they would come up and visit the store, and he was like, "Yeah, when can I come? When? I'll be there. What do you want?" And he couldn't have been more excited to do it. And he flew himself up on his own dime and hung out, went to the store. Like, what a cool dude.
I love the text interchange he had with Camille during the thing. That was just tremendous.
Yeah, I mean, I'm a big Kumail fan, and I'm excited for his new Marvel movie that's coming out. But that was pretty rad. I have heard since that Kumail has seen the movie, but no one indicated to me whether he liked it or not. So we'll just pretend.
He liked his little scene.
Right.
The little scene where he gets mentioned.
Just to piggyback off of Dane's question, was there anybody you wanted to interview outside of like Tarantino that you couldn't get that you wish you had gotten?
Yeah, well, Tarantino was the big, one that got away, but we asked and he wasn't. I can't imagine he's a big Blockbuster video fan. If it had been about, the indie store in his neighborhood, he probably would have done it. But he was also shooting Once Upon a Time in Hollywood when we reached out, so he had no time. There were a couple of people for a while. We were on this vibe of like, let's get people from the movies we rented the most when we were kids, right? And I, being a comedy fan, the two people that were in all the movies I rented when I was a kid were Pauly Shore and Corey Feldman. And I thought it'd be great. For a while, we thought instead of the narration parts, we could get like Corey Feldman in a lab coat explaining the history of the business stuff with a whiteboard and a pointer. And I was hooked on this idea. And it turns out that you can get that done, but they want money. They want a lot of money. Nobody else asked for money to be in the movie. Kevin Smith, Doug Benson, all these great people. And we didn't have any money. So when Corey Feldman's people are like, yeah, I'll be in your movie for blah, blah, blah dollars. And we're like, cool. So you won't be in our movie. So that kind of is how that went. And I don't know if it's them or if it's their agents or managers or whoever, but it's kind of shitty, And there were a few other people who were just like not into it, and that's great, but don't be like, hey, can you give me half your budget? I'll be in your movie. That's like,
yeah.
But at the same time, Lauren Lapkus, very bubbly, gives a very bubbly, bright narration, and I think she's great. So
she's fantastic. That was Doug Benson's idea. We were trying to think. We wanted a woman because we have too many dudes in our movie, and I reached out to Doug and was like, "Who's like the funniest voiceover lady And he's like, "You should get Lauren Lapkus," and then we did.
Nice. All right. Do you have anything else that you are currently working on, or what's next for Taylor on the heels of the Last Blockbuster?
We didn't know when we were making it that it would be such a tongue twister, but we've done a ton of these interviews, and a lot of people have a hard time saying the Last Blockbuster. La blah blah, la blah 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 blah.
The Blast Blockbuster.
The Blast Blockbuster. The best lackluster. I don't have anything in the works really. I'm moving, and it's been a pandemic, and those are my excuses, but I'm sure I'll be back to work soon. But
there's something about a Back to the Future 2 or Back to the Future fan film that's on your IMDb.
Mm-hmm.
Is that something that's been made, or you are?
Yeah, that was what I did a little over a year ago when we were first quarantined and nobody knew how long it was going to last or what we were going to be able to do, and nobody was able to film anything or do anything. So I got together with a bunch of strangers on the internet and split up the movie Back to the Future 2 into 88 scenes and had people recreate it at home, quarantine style. And I stitched the whole thing back together, and we made a shot-for-shot remake of Back to the Future 2. It's up on YouTube.
It is. Okay.
And you can watch it whenever you want, and it's hilarious, but also a little sad because it's pandemic-y, but I think it's fun. It's got a lot of like little kids doing Doc Brown impressions and cats and dogs dressed up as Marty, so it's pretty fun. But yeah, we did that a little over a year ago, and you can check that out at bttftoo.com. I think we still have the domain name.
Nice. Well, thank you for your time. Do you guys have any other parting shot questions?
I can't wait to see Here's to Life. I didn't know anything about it until, we started researching you. Roger Klein is amazing. He's one of the most genuine human beings I've ever met. And I love all their music, so I can't wait to watch this film.
Oh, that's awesome.
I felt kind of like weird that the trailer assumes that nobody's ever heard of the Refreshments, because Banditos was huge when I was in high school and on MTV. But Roger Klein comes to a place here in Omaha called the Waiting Room every year. So
nice.
And they put on an awesome show. But
yeah,
that's great.
Yeah, check it out. It's was my first feature film, and I think it's a cool story, and I think more people than you think have no idea who they are. But the people who do know,
just because they're a huge part of our lives.
Right.
They're like a huge part of
mine
our
too.
Life, like,
one of my favorite albums of the 90s by far.
And welcome back to this week's CF3 TV. We are covering Taylor Morden's The Last Blockbuster, now available on Netflix, so you still can check it out for free. But this is a documentary that covers the big chain known as Blockbuster and how it's gone from 1,000 stores down to 1, and the trials and tribulations that this family is going through to keep the store going. All right, Dane. All right, Dames. What is the last movie you remember renting from Blockbuster?
James, do you remember yours?
I do, actually. There used to be a family video on 168th between Maple and Blondo. And
this is Omaha for the
Nebraska.
non-Ohans.
And I was sitting with Mom one day, and she's like, "What's that movie that you always quote about the carpet cleaning van?" And so I go, "It's Made." She goes, "Do you have that?" I was like, "No, unfortunately I don't." So I said, "But now I kind of want to see it again." So I went to Family Video and rented Made, Jon Favreau's Made, so that I could play the line, the classic line. "Because you lost my fucking carpet cleaning van, and I don't like you, you cocksucker." Like Peter Falk.
So you never had a Blockbuster membership? Only Family Video?
I did, but the last thing I bought at Blockbuster on Maple by the McDonald's was used Blu-rays. And I think I got it was an M. Night Shyamalan movie that I got.
Lady in the Water.
I don't remember which one. Probably
The Village.
It might have been The Village.
So the last thing that I rented from Blockbuster was not even a movie. It was video games, because I thought that when they added video games finally, you can get them for like a week or whatever. I was like, that's a great way to test out a game, because I remember back in the day when, like, if you were like wanting to play a Nintendo game, for example, like you would either have to play it at a friend's house, or if it's like one that nobody ever had, you'd have to buy it.
$40 out the door.
That could have like,
Right.
if the game was a dud, that could have like sent you into a tailspin for forever. But
So Dane, you're
being able
talking
to test out a game is great.
Xbox era, right?
Well, no, for I was renting for PS3 still from Blockbuster. That was
Okay.
the last
Oh,
thing
okay.
I would have
All
had.
right. Wow.
So PS3 game, and it probably would have been one of the NBA 2K games, because I never bought those, but I always wanted to like play a season, and you could do that in a week by like renting and then just binging it like all day on like a Christmas break or something.
There you
So-
go.
That is that.
Especially since those titles are really hard to resell. So renting that and then taking it back meant you didn't have to spend $60 and you didn't get even $6 back.
And I was not one of those people like Ron Funches in the documentary who just, when they closed, he like got to keep all of his stuff. I had nothing by the time they were closed. I was done using them well before that. So
Right. Last rental from Blockbuster was The Fifth Element on VHS tape before, right at the cusp of DVD. Actually, I had to think about this quite a bit as I was preparing for this, and my wife didn't really remember, but the last movie we rented as a couple from Blockbuster, because she had one down the street, was actually Harry Potter and the Half-Blood Prince Part 1, because then we went the next day to go see Part 2 in the theater when we first started seeing each other. So that's kind of about that. I've been to Family Video more recently than that, but as a little aside, I still have one acquisition from years ago that is actually a reclamation, and that's Blockbuster Presents Halloween. It was an exclusive VHS for a long time.
So what did they present? What did they do to it?
Well, they had the exclusive rights to rent this out as a cassette tape, so this was a Blockbuster exclusive for a little while.
That's great.
Actually has on the back, they actually printed off the covers and everything.
That's awesome.
So
Blockbuster Presents.
I had it a long time ago, but I don't know what happened to it, so I actually had to repurchase this for my collection, and it's a Blockbuster tape.
That's amazing. So let's talk about our regular segments, and we'll go through if we have any that apply to this movie, because one, it's new-ish, 2020, and it's a documentary, so it's going to be hard to fit a lot of these in, but we'll go through, and if you got something, you got something. Jeff, do we have anything for Rev It Up this week?
Only if you want to tell us what you were currently driving when you were renting from Blockbuster.
Yep.
So at that time, my 1998 Dodge Neon Sport, which was
Ooh.
destroyed by a falling retaining wall during a thunderstorm.
Oh, jeez.
Jeff, what were you driving?
I had a 1989 Chevrolet Sprint Metro, also called what I used to call the Smurf Mobile, which I'm glad is no longer with us and has been sacrificed to a salvage yard a couple years ago.
It was blue.
It was blue.
2009 black Dodge Avenger.
Ooh.
I remember that car. Yeah.
Somebody actually had a cool car.
It was all right. It was all right.
Yeah.
Dane, Playboy.
Yeah, Playboy Watch.
Playboy doesn't exist in the year 2021, so that's what's relevant to the film that came out in 2021.
So there's not even the last Playboy issue. Ooh.
No,
Playboy
Done.
exists still, doesn't it?
Playboy
No.
still exists as an online format. I'm not sure about the magazine. I thought that was dead too.
there are many movies that you would have rented from Blockbuster that would have had Playboy references in there, and we can hang our hats on that.
Or even potential new cast members.
Right.
And online only as of March 2020, it looks like. Okay. Mad about the movies. So I actually would have figured that Mad would have specifically targeted Blockbuster in like an article at some point when they started taking over video stores, but they didn't in my research. But one reference that I did find was in Mad Magazine number 9. Now you're going to be like, what, 9?
Number
All the way
9?
back then, 1950s? But no, they renumbered. They tried to like restart after like issue 500, and they renumbered them starting with 1, so that I guess people could feel like, oh, we're getting in from the beginning. Let's start becoming Mad fans. It didn't work because they went out of business in like the teens. And so number 9 is an issue I never had. My subscription ended around, I think, 4 of the renumbering. But I did find the online reference to this, and it is when Captain Marvel featured Blockbuster Video in one of its scenes. She crashes through the ceiling of a Blockbuster in the night because it takes place in the 90s.
That's so 90s.
Gotcha reference. The cartoonist Sergio Aragones did some cartoons about the Captain Marvel movie and actually highlighted that sequence. And there's 2 cartoons. The big one is basically her busting through and then people taking advantage by looting. And the bottom cartoon, harder to see, is she comes out of the Blockbuster having crashed through it. A mom walks by and is very puzzled by who that is. And then her son has to explain, that's a superhero, just like Superman. And that's just taking a punk at the obscurity of Captain Marvel. So, Mad Magazine and Blockbuster Video in it together. Okay, so total recast.
Ooh.
All right, so we're going to do a different spin on Total Recast because this is a documentary and it's new and so on and so forth. So we'll give you 2 options, and that the first option is who would you have liked to have seen featured in the interviews that was not? Or you can cast this movie as a dramatized film, and therefore you could cast anybody who's featured in it, even if you want to recast an actor with another actor. That's up to you. So let's start with James Marves. What spin are you gonna put on this?
I'm gonna put on a live action spin. This was a live action movie. Sandi, what's her last name, guys?
Harding.
Sandi Harding, the manager of the Last Blockbuster. What a sweetheart. Hard to not love this lady after watching the film. With another lovable character, Melissa McCarthy. Perfect. She would do it up. That's my total recast for a live action version of this film.
I like it.
Yeah.
Jeff, which angle did you take on this?
If anything, I'd add a little bit more to the documentary. Dramatization actually gives you a bunch of different ideas you could go with, but because you could go George Hardy, Troll 2.
It's the guy who owns the stores.
Yeah.
You can't piss on the Last Blockbuster. I won't allow it.
Exactly. As you were talking about that, that's the first name that popped in my head. But if I was going to total recast and add anybody to this, I'd actually go with a couple interesting choices. I'd go Charles Band from Full Moon because of the height of the direct-to-video craze and how he had his couple different empires, especially Full Moon, and how that played a role in video stores. You could have gotten him to talk about Blockbuster, how well that worked out for him versus other stores, whatever, anything like that. I think that would have been interesting.
So wait, let me ask you about this Charlie Band before you move on to your next one.
Mm-hmm.
Do you know if he was in a similar situation to Lloyd Kaufman where they wouldn't put Full Moon films in Blockbuster, or do you think they would manage to get some in?
I am unsure, but some of like the early like Puppet Master movies, they were actually sub-licensed by Paramount. So they actually were able to be released. I know he had, I think it was, I'm a bad fan, but like Wizard Video, I think was one of his initial, or Empire. That would be the thing to ask him about, like the movies like Parasite. How hard was that to get into like a video store, let alone a corporate one like Blockbuster? I just think that'd be an interesting take for him, because then you have a counterbalance to Lloyd, who absolutely freaking hated the place. Maybe Charlie didn't hate it so bad. Maybe he's kind of in the middle. Just kind of a different viewpoint on that. But then I'd also go and get Shannon Tweed, height of the direct-to-video era as well, just a little extra boom for the sex appeal and how that drove the video market too. And whether that worked in Blockbuster, if she ever did anything like that, you know.
And then, I mean, you could have gotten everybody like that in that genre. Monique
Michael
Parent,
Dudikoff, you know.
Monique Parent, for example. But yeah, I like those picks, and I like that your second one was female, because one of the things that I read in the reviews is that there were too many men in this, and basically you had Ione Skye was the only like famous commenter that was female, and then they chose Lauren Lapkus, of course, for the narration specifically because she's female, but also your main character in the story is Sandi Harding. So
Right.
But
I think it's okay.
With the addition of Shannon Tweed, who was Playboy Playmate of the year 1982, we would add a better segment.
You clearly
So there is a
clearly
Playboy
would
Watch.
the Playboy Watch segment in full effect. Like Jeff, I'm going to choose to cast some new commenters in, and I have two of them as well. And I picked both females specifically for the reason that the reviews and people seem to complain that it's very male-oriented, and it made it seem like video stores were only frequented by men, which is probably not too far off from the truth, but plenty of women did go to the video store, particularly more so Blockbuster, I would imagine, than the little mom and pop places. But my first one would be super geek Felicia Day,
I love it.
who would have been an amazing choice. She likes movies like The Wraith and stuff like that, and would have been able to give us all kinds of great commentaries there. And then the second one is actually married to somebody who was in the film, so it's probably just an extra email or an extra ask to get her in it. June Diane Raphael, who's married to Paul Scheer,
Yep.
and is his co-host on How Did This Get Made, for example. She's hilarious and would be great and add some more female commentary into the film. And I'm doing my best Paul Scheer impersonation today.
Plenty of shine on that dome.
Hey guys, do you know who Jamie Gertz is? This looks exactly like Jamie Gertz. I had to laugh at that, and that people didn't know who Jamie Gertz was. I'm like, she's the extra wife or the fiance in Twister. Come on. Let's move on to some of our favorite lines. Did you guys write anything down? Just because it's a documentary doesn't mean it can't have great lines.
I'd probably go with Lloyd's segment, honestly. Everything
Lloyd's
he said
whole
was a
segment.
line.
Okay. And two of the lines that I picked out are from Lloyd's segment, and here's some of his gems. Most of the people in the entertainment industry are the scum of the earth. That's correct. And then he says, trauma is the herpes of the movie industry. We're not going away.
Can't be treated.
And then this isn't a line, but it's something that it's a visual line, we'll say. And I thought Jeff would have really loved this one.
No, yeah.
back of the semi truck for
Stargate.
20,000 copies.
Thank you, MGM and Live Entertainment, for your VHS tape that came out first.
And probably like 2,000 of those are all going to like one store in Los Angeles, so they can make sure that you can always get it no matter what. And then my other favorite line was when the Bend, Oregon film critic, Jared Rasick, or Rasick, I don't know. He's not famous. He says, getting home and watching a pizza. Watching a pizza? Like he messes up while talking and they leave the line in. I love that. Eating a pizza and watching a movie is what he wanted to say. Watching a pizza. So that's favorite lines.
Well, I'm going to go a little bit different on mine.
Okay.
Since it's a documentary, I mean, it's not really driven by, written word. It's just all, on the spot stuff. I decided to go the route of the Twitter handle, The Last Blockbuster. And there's some gems there. I'm just going to read it because it's funny. For decades, people have said our business model will be our downfall. And you know what? We have to commend them on their spot-on analysis. And then Farrah Penn says, every time you return a tape without rewinding it, a bald eagle flies into a plane engine. I just wanted to throw those in there because they're funny. And those come from an account on Twitter called The Last Blockbuster.
Awesome. And does anybody think that anyone is in a situation to say, I deserve more credit? Anybody featured in this film or who worked on the film?
Taylor
Morden, okay.
Yeah, I mean, we kind of already touched on the other stuff that he did, but I watched his documentary on refreshments, and it's amazing. I mean, I went and I rented it on Amazon Prime, and it's well worth the watch. So he definitely deserves more credit than he's gotten. It's phenomenal.
Yeah, and I would agree with that. And I started watching some clips. I started pulling some clips for his interview segment from his Back to the Future fan film, which you can watch for free on YouTube. And that's going to be something that I'm going to sit down and watch. And he just did this for free, just during the pandemic for people to have fun with. And if you watch the interview with him preceding this, you've seen clips that we pulled out from that. But there's some great stuff. There's claymation scenes, animated scenes with kids playing parts, scenes with female Martys and Doc Browns and stuff. It's just all over the place, and it's I can't wait to actually have some time to sit down and watch that, hopefully this weekend. But I also think that Sam Levine or Levine deserves more credit. This guy here. Yep. Don't forget, he was Neil Schreiber in Freaks and Geeks.
Yep.
Yeah, I can't believe you didn't pull the picture of the three of us.
Oh, it's right here. There you go. Wonders of post-production.
Nice.
He was at our Omaha Comic-Con a few years back. Jeff, anybody else besides Taylor that you wanted to mention?
Probably anybody that worked on this. It was clearly a labor of love, and they really put a lot of work into everything on this documentary. But I definitely think Taylor should get a little more notoriety out of this one.
Yeah, and let's mention Zeke Cam, too, who is credited as the writer. And people say, how do you write a documentary? Trust me. You have to structure it, the narrative, the narration, everything like that. So I'm sure he was huge, and that's why he's a film by not just Taylor Morden, but Zeke Cam. So I deserve more credit. Budget and box office doesn't apply. He told us they had no money, and they made it with no money. And this went to Netflix, so theaters were closed in 2020 when it was produced, but it debuted on Netflix in 2021. And I think that's going to bring us to our final thoughts. We actually asked Taylor Morden to score the film for us. And so we're going to start with him, and then we're each going to give our final thoughts. So here's Taylor. Considering the experience, the film as an experience for you, making it, what it's going to mean for your career, things of that nature, what would you give The Last Blockbuster? Scale of 0 to 100 for our patented Cult Filmometer.
I mean, for me, for what it's done, what it's currently doing for my life and my career and the process of making it, I got to give it 100. I couldn't have imagined how awesome it was going to be. I mean, just to get to spend a day hanging out with Kevin Smith talking about movies, that's 100 for me, And then we're a bunch of days just like that making this thing. And then the fact that it came out and has helped keep the store open longer than it would have is like a dream come true. Because, you make a documentary, rarely do you actually get to impact the thing that you're making the documentary about. Right. People are going to love or hate ska music, whether or not I make a movie, it doesn't matter. But we made a movie about Blockbuster, and because of that, it gets to stay open a little longer, and some amount of people will get to go there before it closes, and that's pretty awesome.
And as expected, we wouldn't expect anything less than that.
Respectable. We're starting off with 100 and moving on to Dames Marv's. Give us your final thoughts.
Sure. Well, at the beginning of this, he said he's going to be a hater if we score it low. And I knew already I wasn't scoring. I knew what I was scoring it at the time that he said that. But I was thinking to myself also, to get into the 90s, you're going to have to be something like along the lines of American Movie or The King of Kong, A Fistful of Quarters. Those are two are clearly documentaries that are well into the 90s for me. I really enjoyed this. It's not a subject that I ever really thought about until I saw the title, and I was like, that is really interesting because I miss the experience. And saying that now doesn't really act as a successful apology, because I'm part of the reason that they didn't succeed, because I just stopped going at some point. And if I would have known and we all had the chips down on the table and knew how it was going to go, I'm sure we all would have done our parts to keep it going just a little bit longer. The diehards like us would have, for sure. So I'm going to tell you, Taylor, I hope the score, putting up against every movie that I've ever witnessed in my life. So, Taylor, I hope the score that I give when we all give our score sits well with you.
It's been a while. Good old friend. It was nice to have a walk down memory lane with Blockbuster and the story it went through. And good to see the family in Bend, Oregon, and power to them for keeping it going and keep on going. Documentary was really entertaining. It was nice to see all like the Dish Network site kind of stories and getting Lloyd on and just everybody. It was a really good time watching. My wife got a kick out of it too. Just got to thinking about the old experiences and what video stores should probably be bringing these days. And that's more of an experience more than an actual full-on library of videotapes. But, it's well-directed. It's well-paced. Runtime was very good. Didn't really feel like they were cutting too much out. Yeah, there's probably more stories they could have shared, but then you're talking maybe like 2-3 hours. I think it's really great. If you want to get this one for your collection, the Blu-ray is on Amazon for $20. You can still get that. Don't go looking for the VHS tape on eBay unless you wish to spend at least $150 or more. Taylor, it sounded like had a copy up there. Might want to check that out. That might have something very cool with it. Not sure. Didn't check it out myself. But I will get you my score in just a moment. But Dane, what did you think?
Yeah, so one of the things that I read in the reviews that made me kind of go, what? Was that I would say a good 25% of the reviews I read mentioned that the documentary is too long. Now, it's 92 minutes, I believe, and I don't know what length people are expecting when they go in to watch a documentary, but like 90 minutes, and you guys know me, if a movie's too long, I always complain about it, and I'm always like, yes, that movie was 88 minutes, and that's why I liked it. I didn't feel that this is too long. Maybe it's because the subject was for me, and I'm not being paid to write a review about something that I don't inherently like. Although if you are a film critic, this should be right up your alley, and you should not get bored watching it because it's very entertaining, has some great people in it, and it's ironic that they're making you nostalgic for a place that killed the truly better places. Let's be honest with you. I'm giving a shout out to That's Rentertainment in Iowa City, Iowa, where I saw the majority of Trauma movies for the first time because of them. I lived 2 blocks away, and they had dollar rentals, and it was incredible. Those are the places that I would never be able to get, things that you can find at Blockbuster. So I never really used Blockbuster until, I got married and had to watch new releases or whatever. But
I see how that works.
Film fan, it's still funny that this does make you feel nostalgic for a Blockbuster and be rooting for a Blockbuster video. Although, let's be honest, this was always a mom and pop one that was forced into the corporate branding. It was never corporate owned. So that's one good thing you can take away from it. And I went to their website, and you can buy merch from them, Blockbuster merch. I wanted the beanie because I'm a beanie guy, the one that she hand makes in the movie, and it's sold out. You can't get them. I doubt she can keep them in stock. They were only $26 too, that she hand makes them. Let's get to our scores for this fine documentary film. 3, 2, wow, what a difference. Blockbuster Video. 86, 88, 90.
You see? Your stupid minds! Stupid!
Final score is a 91 even. 91 for the Last Blockbuster.
A 91 even falls in between Mallrats at 89.75 and Total Recall at 93.5.
Just under Total Recall.
Well, I think Taylor would be happy to know that his film beat
A Kevin Smith flick.
a Kevin Smith film. But hey, this is a Kevin Smith movie because he's in it.
Yeah.
So that was the Last Blockbuster.